Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Christian Capitalist Podcast. We're so glad to be joined today by Chris Stevens, my friend, who's a business school professor at Notre Dame University and a delightful person to contribute to our conversation about Christian capitalism. We're so glad that you're here to join us, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you, Rich. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And good to see you again. I'm glad to see you're wearing some Notre Dame gear. I don't have any Notre Dame gear myself. I love it, but I wore a Shamrock shirt for you today.
I did see that. I know you're rocking the gear pretty strong.
Rocking the gear, exactly. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to see you. As you and I have discussed before, the Christian capitalist movement is about hard work and generous giving to the poor and needy in the name of Jesus Christ. And I know that you and I have, our previous discussions have had lots of opportunity to talk about that. So during our time together today, I hope that we'll get a chance to hear some of your stories with the goal of inspiring others who are listening to this podcast, who are all different ages, all different walks of life around the nation, or get a chance to inspire them to go forth and do likewise. So let's start off.
Well, it's great. And I read the reviews of your book, which are just really wonderful and very complimentary. And just with people recognizing that it's not sacrilegious to make money, provided that you do good with the money that you make. And I believe firmly, and I think the motto of your book and your whole organization, that whatever you give, you're going to get back twice in return.
I love that, Chris. It sounds like we are on the same page, my friend. Well, for those who haven't had a chance to get to know you, study your background, or see the work that you've done, would you mind giving us a bit of your background and how you got to be? We'll talk a little bit about your teaching at Notre Dame, but how you got to Notre Dame.
Sure. Well, first of all, you and I share a common ground. You were a colonel at St. John's College High School in Washington, D.C., and I was in a lieutenant colonel, a little bit before your time, though. But I had a chance to be able to select where I wanted to go to school and chose Notre Dame to come and get an education, play basketball back in 1970.
Mm.
That was a long time ago. I'm so old, when I go to the museum, the guards try to put me back on display. It's horrible. I stopped at an antique auction the other day. 3 people bid on me. Wasn't good. When I was a boy, the Dead Sea was only sick. But anyway, so from Notre Dame, I had a chance to play basketball here, play some pro ball in Belgium, which was great. Won a championship there, so I was able to kind of be completion. Mm-hmm. And then I started in sales with Procter & Gamble, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cincinnati, Boston. Found out that P&G doesn't stand for Procter & Gamble. It stands for Pack and Go. But that was a great run. Then became president of an Anheuser-Busch distributorship, ran a large spirits, wine, and beer company. And then I met two guys that had a dream of changing the coffee world one cup at a time back in 1996. And 3 of us started the Keurig premium coffee system, the single cup system. That was a great ride. But somebody once said you should have 2 careers in life, one to the age 60 and one from 60 on. Mm-hmm. I took it literally and came back here to Notre Dame to start teaching when I was 60 years old.
Wow.
12 years ago, and have been just delighted to be back here among these amazing young people.
Isn't that something? And so, Chris, as we discussed a few minutes ago, part of the concept of the Christian capitalist is hard work. It's what we call the twin pillar is generous giving. Let's focus on work for just a little bit. So during your time at Procter & Gamble or Anheuser-Busch, or in developing Keurig, how did your faith come into play in your work? Lots of folks have different opinions on how that should happen, but let's just start off by asking if it did.
I think it was a process for me. I was a foster kid, bounced around some pretty bad homes, had an unstable kind of upbringing, and religion was not a part of who I was. I was not Catholic, but I when I started in sales with P&G, it was all about the career path, and so I wasn't much in those days, but I was all I thought about. Yeah. And I think over time, you start to develop, raised a family with 5 kids. You start to realize that there are other things that are a little bit more important in life, and that none of this would be possible without the grace of God.
Mm. And so when with Procter & Gamble being in kind of the consumer products, Anheuser-Busch being, beverage, and then Keurig, how did different industries kind of shape the way that you thought about faith and work, if at all?
Well, I think the good Lord had to be looking over us at Keurig, because when I got there, the prototype made a great cup of coffee, but it wasn't going to stand up in terms of manufacturing. And the packaging line that would make the K-Cups also was a lousy design.
Mm.
So this is after I made the jump, and we almost shut it down 3 different times. But I think the good Lord was looking over us because He helped us find a way each of those times to be able to push through. Somebody once said, "It's not how far you fall in life that matters; it's how high you bounce back."
Mm.
And we had to learn from that. And we had some setbacks. We had the 2001, trade towers going down, and the Pentagon. We couldn't even get into offices during that period of time for security reasons.
Wow.
And then the 2008 collapse of the economy. So we had our challenges, et cetera. But you know, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And so again, we were very, very blessed to have the good Lord watching us.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. In the book of James, James advises Christians who are reading or people who are reading his letter to pray for guidance to God, for some kind of sense of the Holy Spirit and where they should go and what they should do in their business. And Paul likewise instructs his folks through his letters to be mindful of where the Holy Spirit wants you to go. How do you think that plays out, whether it was your experience at Keurig or today as you instruct young business leaders?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be able to teach these young people. I came back here as much to try to teach young people how not to make the same stupid mistakes that I made in life. They say that experience is life's toughest teacher. It gives you the test before you've ever had a chance to study for it. Mm. And I think that that's really, really true. And the young people today are just so connected to the AirBobs and texting and social media. They have very, very little time to be able to quiet the voices and to seek spiritual support. So I think, the kids here at Notre Dame they get that. They totally get that, even though they're very, very busy. And I just try to teach them about life, not just about management or strategy or leadership, but I try to teach them about life because they're going to have setbacks. And as I try to tell them all, victories are going to feed your ego, setbacks will build your character. Wow. And certainly we've all had a lot of setbacks in life.
Absolutely. And as somebody who's owned businesses myself, some that have been successful, some that have failed, I can relate to that too. We had a guest on the podcast earlier who said that he had a mentor that he thought was very successful, who'd started a number of businesses, and that his experience was that something like 10 or 15% of the time those businesses are successful. The rest are trial and error and mostly error. I see you nodding. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And what I tell my students also is nothing happens in business until somebody sells something. And people are not going to buy anything from you unless they see the value of it. And I'm a huge disciple of Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, the golden circle, where based on how the human brain actually makes decisions, people don't buy what you're selling. They buy why you're selling it. They buy what you believe. And if you make their belief your belief, then you'll be successful. How did Dr. King become the spokesperson for the civil rights movement back in the 60s? There were plenty of other great orators in the day, and he wasn't the only person who suffered in the pre-civil rights era. But how did he? He didn't tell people what needed to be changed. He talked to people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe. And he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. So I think, being able to have dreams and have people that you can look up to and learn from is really, really important in life.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. Now you're on the faculty at the Mendoza College of Business at Notre Dame, and get a chance. It sounds like based on my going back and forth with you this morning in an effort to get here today, you got 4 classes that you're teaching. So is that a mix of undergrad and graduate? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, they're trying to kill me. I have 6 classes this
Woo!
semester. I know, but I have 4 of them back to back to back to back. And as I mentioned to you, another colonel from St. John's who was 20 years in the Navy and was a supply chain captain, a supply officer, it will be addressing my class tomorrow, all 4 classes. And what's great is Eddie Fishburne's a very spiritual guy himself, and he's weaved that into his presentation to say, it's not just about you, all right? And only by the grace of God are we having the chance to be able to do what we're doing.
Wow. That's words to live by. Let me ask you, when you have those, getting back to what we were just talking about a minute ago, about how frequently even successful business people like you have experienced failure, where does God come into play when you have a setback like that? I agree with you completely that it's about how you bounce back. But where's God come into that bounce back?
Yeah, I would say, I certainly pray, but I would say that my my wife Therese, who is a devout Christian, really brought to me the ability to be able to try to see God and see Christ in a different light than maybe I ever saw them. Even though I had a Notre Dame education, I didn't become Catholic until I was 25 years
Mm.
old. But she really helps me stay balanced. And when I get moving too fast and that happens too much, and I get overbooked like I am, she brings me back to earth with that, which is great.
I love that. One of my friends who was our first guest on the podcast, Dan Kern, spent a lot of time with Mother Teresa when he was in the Air Force and stationed in the Philippines. And Mother Teresa, I'd love your thoughts on this. Mother Teresa had an interesting way of putting it I think the Holy Spirit inspired in her. She said to him, "Every single person is called by God to be someone special to someone else." It sounds like your wife served that role for you as kind of a mentor, a sounding board when it comes
Yeah,
to faith.
and my kids do too. I must say that. I love one of Mother Teresa's quotes. She said that they say that God only gives you what you can handle. I wish he didn't trust me so much.
Exactly. It's funny. I think about that too. A lot of people look at the book of Job when it comes to business trials and errors, successes and failures. And I look at poor Job and think, at some point God's going to give you what He's going to give you, whether He thinks you can handle it or not. You just got to
Yeah,
take it from there.
yeah, no question.
Yeah. Well, so what kind of classroom instruction with these 6 classes that you're handling this fall? What kind of things are you talking about these days when it comes to the concept of work? We'll get to giving in just a second, but anything as you and I are starting to talk here that's striking you in terms of kind of an academic approach to this notion of work and how we work to glorify God?
Well, I try to talk a lot about balance. And there are places here at Notre Dame. There's a chapel pretty much in every single building. There's opportunities to quiet the voices. And there's a very, very special place here. I call it the Cross in the Woods.
Mm.
And when I'm getting a little bit out of sorts, I try to get there. And fortunately, it's been a little while since I got there. But if you go from the grotto at Notre Dame, which is patterned after the grotto at Lourdes
Mhm.
um, in France, and if you go up the road towards St. Mary's, you go into the woods and there's a life-size crucifixion of Christ, a
Wow.
life-size statue of Mother Mary, of Mary Magdalene, a prayer bench. And there's places like that where I try to encourage the students, go there, quiet the voices. They say if you meditate 1 minute, it gives you 7 more minutes of productivity.
Wow.
So being able, I think, to help this generation quiet the voices, get outside their heads. It's not just about them. We do service days. So my classes are Principles of Management, which on the first day I go, okay, everybody here for Principles of Management, raise your hand. Duh. And I say, you're in the wrong class.
Oh.
We're changing the name to Principles of Leadership. You lead people, you manage affairs. People don't need to be managed, they need to be inspired, they need to be led. So I teach foundations of strategy, 2 sections, principles of leadership, and then I design a sports class called Sports Management Experiential Learning, which 20 of the 26 classes are guest speakers. If someone has an interest in a career in sports management, and so many do, we cover it. Analytics, law, ethics,
Wow,
law,
that's great.
agents, you name it. And then I teach a very, very cool course to master's students called ESTEAM, Engineering, Science, Technology, Entrepreneurship Masters. It's an amazing, amazing program. And it's for STEM grads, undergraduate STEM grads, that want to learn how to run a business, monetize their inventions. They have annual capstone projects. So my class to them was personal branding, personal marketing. How do you market yourself? How do you achieve what you want to achieve? And on the first day of every class, I give my students a gift. And that gift is a book called Five. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And Jeff Bezos was living in a 500 square foot apartment. When the internet was invented, he said, how can I take advantage of this? Well, maybe I could sell books online. 5 years later, he was worth $10 billion at Amazon.com.
Just 5 years.
Julia Child graduated from a French cooking school, had a quirky idea for a TV show, and 4 years later, she won an Emmy. So I try to help my students dream, but also look out long term. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And over 5,000 books later, the author loves me.
I'll bet. That's awesome. Hey, we should talk about whether your students would be interested in reading The Christian Capitalist once we're done with the podcast. But let me
Absolutely.
let me ask you this. Um, Along that line, when you have students either at the undergraduate level or the graduate level come to you and say, "I really want to start a business," how do you talk to folks about expressing their faith in their business? There are national, really even global brands where we as Christians know, well, that company stands for something. We know that's a quote unquote Christian company. But for the average small business owner, that may be something that they're worried about for legal reasons or HR. What do you have any thoughts for folks like that who are taking your class?
Yeah, I have. I've invested in several businesses, and I've had students come to me with different business ideas. And I basically say you got to answer 6 questions and answer them thoroughly. One, what's your idea, your product or service, or whatever, in less than 10 seconds?
Well,
Two, who's your customer and how does she want to buy? Does she want to buy off the web? Does she like retail? Three, what's your competitive advantage? Jack Welch, who took over General Electric in 1981, it was doing $16 billion of sales, transformed it into $135 billion of sales in 15 years by selling off things. So he said, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. Next, how are you going to make a profit? Are you going to make a royalty? Is it profit? Or how are you going to make money? Five, where's it going to be in 5 years?
hmm.
What's does it really have legs? Who can knock you off? And then finally, what's your why? What's your cause? What's your belief? What do you stand for? And I only invest in businesses that stand for something that are going to do good with the profits that they make.
Well, I love that. Let me ask you a question about that sixth question. Start with, or what's your why? How many times have you found folks who are talking to you about starting a business and yet can't answer the why?
Several, because they're so focused on trying to do the business. I'll tell you, in the early days of Keurig, we were a startup, and so we were focused on trying to build up enough sales to be able to introduce a home unit, and we weren't really focused much on a why. But the parent company that bought us, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, did have a why. They committed 5% of their pre-tax profits to corporate social responsibility initiatives. Fair trade coffee. They became the number one purchaser of fair trade coffee in the world. And for those who don't know what fair trade is, they pay a premium to the growers so that they can sustain themselves during the non-growing season. They gave their employees 52 hours of paid time off to volunteer in the community.
Wow.
They offset 100% of their carbon footprint. So that we then at Keurig got a stronger sense of really what a why is and what it needs to be.
And so, as a result, did Keurig change any of its? Well, I guess once you were owned by Green Mountain, that was already kind of the corporate culture there.
Yeah, I was vice president of corporate relations, so I had a chance to be able to run our entire corporate social responsibility business, and it was pretty powerful. And again, we would ship over when we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. We shipped over $50,000 of free coffee to our troops every single month,
Wow.
so that they had something that they could at least be able to enjoy in that horrible circumstance.
When we talk, Chris, and what a terrific as a veteran. I know Eddie's a veteran. My father was a veteran of the Air Force. I know that the troops certainly appreciated that, especially in those hardship deployments. Let me ask you a question about that in terms of kind of the macro perspective. A lot of folks look at the title of this book and the title of this podcast, and especially Christians who are devout and well read from an academic perspective. Many look at it and say, I don't think you can be both a Christian and a capitalist because those are at odds based on the greed that is so often synonymous with capitalism. What do you think about that, though?
I think it's one bad apple spoils a whole bunch. And you have certain capitalists that don't really give back. But then you've got people, the Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. I believe there's over $1 trillion in foundation money that's out there that's designated to try to help mankind. The challenge sometimes is getting it to the source and where it's actually needed. So, and I think our country has taken a leadership role in that. We at Notre Dame have 6 colleges. The youngest college is the Keough School of Global Affairs. It was founded in 2015. When Father Sorin had founded Notre Dame in 1842, He said this college would be one of the most powerful means for doing good. And we've been doing good. Father Hesburgh was incredible in terms of rights of people and helping the oppressed. But the Kiel School of Global Affairs has got, I don't know, something like 200 initiatives all around the world trying to help those in need.
Wow.
And so I think we try to live it here at Notre Dame and give back. And, again, whatever you give in life, you're going to get back twice.
Well, and so let's talk about that a little bit. You and I have discussed this before. The theme of the Christian Capitalist book and the theme of the project is from Paul's letter to Timothy, where he says, for folks who have money in the present age, meaning then or now, tell them don't to brag, but to share generously, be ready to do good works, to focus on the treasure that really is life up in heaven. What do you think about that concept that what you give, you get back in double measure?
I think it's absolutely so true. And if we have a program here called the Alliance for Catholic Education, and it's a master's program where after students graduate, they then become teachers in inner city schools throughout the country. And they earn a master's degree, but they're doing good there. And it is impossible. I tell my students, it is impossible for you to sprinkle kindness on others and not get some on yourself. So next Wednesday, I'm going to send them an email on Tuesday night and say, no class tomorrow, all 5 classes. No class tomorrow, but you have to go out and perform service. You got to do something for 75 minutes. You can help the dorm workers. You can walk around the lake and pick up trash. You can tutor somebody who's in need. You can help a friend who is stressed out and feeling down, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And what comes back, Rich, is just incredible. I do this every semester with every class. And, they just say, I've never done this before, but I feel so good to do it. And until people are led to the water, you can't make them drink, but once they drink, the thirst is quenched.
Well, let's talk about, I love that. What a beautiful way to put that, Chris. Let's talk about that for a minute. It is a cliche to talk about the joy of giving. Where do you think the joy of giving arises for humans?
I think, again, because we're so busy and there's so much pressure on young people to get into the right college, to get the right job, to sprinkle their resume with all kinds of things that make them look even better than they are. There's so much pressure there, but what I try to talk about is balance. You've got to have balance. And no one's going to ever see on their tombstone, I wish I spent more time at the office. But you're also not going to see in any tombstone, I wish I spent more time partying, or I wish I spent more time, calivanning.
Right.
So being able to help young people just understand that balance is really, really important. And you need to take time for your spiritual self. Because when that cup goes dry, it's hard to replenish it. You gotta. It's kind of like a water softener. I mean, water softener. You have water softener in your home in a high mineral areas because you can't let the pipes build up. If you ignore that, then the pipes build up and bad things happen. And if you ignore your spiritual self, bad things are going to happen.
Amen. Well, so let's talk about then a little bit about giving. You mentioned that Green Mountain Farms had a commitment to give away 5% for social responsibility initiatives. But the business that you have currently, at least that I read about on your bio on the Notre Dame website, is even more committed. So can you tell us a little bit about CS 74 Ventures?
Yeah, I did a few investments and stuff, and then for organization, I turned it into an LLC. And the commitment right from the beginning was to give 50% of any profits to charities or corporate social responsibility initiatives. So far, it's been about 95%, mostly because some of the companies haven't done that well. But
right.
But for those that have, I try to make sure that the money gets donated. And I want to give a shout out to my wife, Teresa, again. When we moved here, she was thinking about working in different things, and she knew a friend who ran this beauty salon that had a boutique attached to it, and she wanted to get out of the boutique business. So Teresa and we bought the boutique, and she ran it herself. She had never done math and accounting or that type of stuff of this magnitude, purchasing, inventory turns, et cetera. She learned the business, and she dedicated 100% of the profits to St. Margaret's House in downtown South Bend that helps oppressed women, single moms, homeless people, et cetera. And, we gave them probably over $50,000 of money and merchandise to be able to help them. And I think, COVID destroyed it, and so we had to kind of shut it down. But not before we thought, you know what, this is pretty good. So if you take a look and factor that in, more than 100% of the profits of what we've invested in have been given to charity in some way, shape, or
Isn't
form.
that wonderful? And so, what called you into post the boutique? What called you into to making this commitment to give half? And it sounds like operationally more to charity.
Just I was blessed to do well in my career. Keurig became, or Green Mountain became, the number one growth stock on Wall Street, I think, for 10 years.
Wow.
So I can have a second bowl of cornflakes in the morning. I'm blessed to be able to be in that position. But I just thought, I believe in helping people with dreams. Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. Marianne Radmacher, stand often in the company of dreamers, for they believe you can do impossible things. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams, said Eleanor Roosevelt. And Thoreau said, go confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life that you imagine. And I've been blessed to live a very good life. And so our family just wants to share what we can share.
And share it's so funny at Online Home Church, we talk about that every week, that we don't do an offering because the church is online and web-based, so there's no cost to it, but we just share the blessings God has given us with the world in the name of Jesus. And so,
Amen.
how did you, there's a number of companies that are part of CS74. How did you choose those companies?
I think, again, going back to, it was somebody that had a dream. It was somebody that had what I thought would be a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
That was their technology companies, their consumer products companies. I'll give you an example. So somebody in the MBA program at Notre Dame came to me, and I didn't have him in class. And he said, you're the coffee man. So I want to talk to you about an idea I've got on coffee. So he said, I rescued a dog from a pet shelter. And in my research, I found out that 2.1 million dogs are euthanized annually. I love coffee and I love dogs. So I want to start a coffee company, Grounds and Hounds Coffee. Every pound saves a hound. And so the idea is that he gave 20% of his profits towards local pet shelters that had no kill policies. And so when you order the coffee off the website, whether it's whole bean or now K-Cups, he knows what zip code it's being sent to. They then send to that local pet refuge shelter a percentage of the sales price. And that's pretty cool. He's done very well, but that's definitely a company that's got a why. Those are the kinds of things that attract me.
I just love that. And so, speaking of competitive advantage, I can't help but think, as you're talking about evaluating different companies and whether they're a fit for your company, do you have this kind of competitive process like Shark Tank or something like that where folks come pitch?
No, I'm not that smart. But at one point, based on the ones that I had gotten involved with, my financial guy finally said, enough. But it's, there's been some that have been able to do well. And in some instances, we were able to support people that just needed that little bit of extra support to get over the edge. Yeah. And, with Keurig, we almost shut it down 3 times. So,
wow.
I've done second rounds of fundraising, et cetera, with certain companies, not for quite a while, but it's just part of what I love to do.
I love it. And so the flip side of the coin then is if you're committed to giving 50% of the profits away, what kind of process do you have to choose the charities that you're going to support through the profits? It sounds like you may not be all the way there yet in terms of having profits to share, but how do you think about that? I mean, St. Margaret's and the boutique is a terrific example. What kind of thoughts have you had about where to put the money?
Well, first of all, I said, you've got to be real. You've got to support something that's real to you. Lou Holtz, once, the great football coach, said, when all is said and done, more is said than done. And if you really have a why, if you really have a belief, if you really have a soft spot in your heart for something, make that what you want to do. I've got a local artist here that I met. He's 79 years old. His name is Robert Bloss, Bloss. And he's got the grizzly beard, the ponytail, the cane and everything, and he still paints every single day.
Wow.
And his artwork is incredible. If anybody goes to Instagram, @RBloss Paintings, you can see it. And so we found this guy, and they were struggling with how to market it. And Therese and I have worked hard to try to be able to help. I brought his challenge to my classes. They worked on business plans, website design, that type of thing. Teresa's helped in terms of really getting organized and stuff. And we're going to have an open house on October the 18th at his studio. And he's giving a certain percentage of the sales price towards the Boys and Girls Clubs here and also St. Margaret's House, coincidentally.
Wow.
And so I'd like to understand what is important to people before we invest in them. And if they've got a why to them and we believe in that, then that's a good thing.
That's fantastic. And so let me ask you then along that line, one of the things that we talk about in the book is the Good Samaritan story. And when you talk about St. Margaret's and what Mr. Bloss is doing, I can't help but think about the Good Samaritan and taking the time to actually help someone in need. What do you think about that, and how does that work from your perspective as a businessman, where you've got a lot of different business experiences to call on and businesses that you're currently involved with? Where does that story take you as you think about that?
Well, it doesn't have to be big. You don't have to be investing in companies to do the right thing. And I tell my students, I said, because I know the different intersections in South Bend where homeless people hang out. And they got the sign, I'm a vet, I lost my child, I'm homeless. And I said, I watch people sometimes and they pull up to that stoplight and they roll up their windows. They try to avoid eye contact. I said, how about you do this? How about you get out of your car, take out a $5 bill and ask them, hey, what's your name? My name's Chris. You got hope today, okay? God bless you. Stay strong.
Yeah.
You're going to feel like a cleanly washed car.
Yeah.
You ever notice how when your car gets washed, it just seems to run better? That's kind of how our hearts are as well. So I just try to practice that, all the time. And I came out of a bank the other day, and there was a homeless guy who was just walking by. He didn't ask for anything, and I just pulled out a $20 bill and gave it to him and said, "Hey, have a good day." No exchange of dialogue or anything. He didn't even say thank you, but it's a good thing.
It is a good thing because I think there's something to be said for giving without expectation of anything in return, even a thank you. What do you think
That's
about
what
that?
real charity is.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much in our world that's challenged, and there's so much in this world that needs to be fixed, but there's no substitute for kindness. And kind ends in ND. So I try to, with Notre Dame, so I try to help my students understand they have an obligation to be kind.
I love that. And speaking of words, as you're talking, I can't help but think of the Latin base for charity, which is caritas. And St. Thomas Aquinas 800 years ago saying caritas really is the foundation virtue of everything. It is kind of the source of why we do anything as people. We're made in God's image, so we need to love each other and give to them.
So your career, if you don't mind, I'm going to flip the tables here. You were a naval officer, you're a lawyer, you've done so much from an investment standpoint, but God gave you a calling. Can you maybe share with me how you chose your latest path?
Chris, I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. So I have one mission. My why is very simple, and that's to preach the gospel, just to share the good news in any way I can with anyone who has ears to listen and the ability to hear. And as a businessman and a lawyer who focused on corporate kind of work, I thought it seemed to me that I represented so many people over the years who were doing deals that I was the lawyer on and made a fortune, but never thought as they were going through this about how to share that fortune with others. But a few clients did, and over the course of time, I thought, you know what? When you are in a business and doing well, that the ability and the willingness to share with others really makes you both a Christian and a capitalist, if that's your faith. And so just prayed a lot about it, and the Holy Spirit guided me into this direction to try and figure out a way that the business and faith could to marry up for the benefit of everyone, business owner, the folks in the business, and the community around them, especially the poor and needy.
Well, I certainly admire your ministry, and there you can tell what churches are able to really convey the message of God by driving around on a Sunday morning. When we lived in Boston before we moved here, we went to a church called the Grace Chapel in Arlington, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And Minister Wilkerson, amazing guy. He just spoke in a way that people got it. And he wouldn't talk in lectures so much about the Bible so much as opposed to applying it to today and stories. And one of the cool things he does every Palm Sunday is he acts out Easter from the perspective of a different person, Joseph of Arimathea,
Mm.
from Pontius Pilate, you name it. And he tells the story. And it's so riveting that when you leave there, you just feel so filled. So I think for people that are struggling with their faith, to be able to keep trying different churches if you're not really happy with what you've got. Sometimes you find your passion, sometimes your passion finds you.
Mm.
You just have to be willing to put yourself in enough position to let that happen.
Well said. And sometimes, even if somebody is not found a particular church that they are engaged with at that moment, we've in this process of rolling out the book and starting the podcast, we meet more and more people who describe themselves as pastors or ministers, but in the workplace. What do you think of that notion as a devout Catholic, as an Episcopal pastor? We spend our time in church going through the liturgy. What do you think about being able to worship God in the workplace?
I think it's different. There are different organizations. So, for instance, I ask my students, okay, I got to go to Hobby Lobby. Anybody want to meet me there on Sunday? Oh, yeah, Professor, I'll meet you there. I said, no, don't, because they're closed on Sunday.
I was going to say they fell for it. And then we'll go to
they
lunch
out
at
on
Chick-fil-A.
Saturday. How about Chick-fil-A? They call those. I just reviewed last week. What characteristics do spiritual organizations have? They build faith into the DNA of the company and the organization in everything that they do. And companies that respect the Sabbath, companies that won't agree to certain things that are controversial, they usually attract people who believe what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just tell the viewers, I mentioned I'm a firm believer in Simon Sinek, Sinek. If you go to YouTube and type in Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle, up will pop a 17.5-minute TED Talk that he gave back in 2009 about finding your why and about the importance that people don't buy what you're selling, they buy why you're selling it. And it's really, he's got another one, if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. And he talks a lot about, spirituality and things like that people have to have a why to them if you really want to have loyal and trusted customers.
I love that, Chris. And so my final question to you is, and I think you may have just hit the nail on the head. What does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist?
It means everything. I mean, this place is not for everybody, but it is for those who believe. And we're open to believers of all faiths. But certainly this is a Catholic institution, and we try to live by the rule. I mean, we have, again, chapels in every building here. We just had the inauguration ceremony of only our third president since 1952. Father Bob Dowd has taken over, and he's a very reflective, very, very bright, reflective man and a pastoral priest. And so I think being able to be in a place where spirituality and your faith is a part of the DNA of where you're at just makes you feel better every single day you walk there.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We sure appreciate you joining us on the Christian Capitalist Podcast. And just as a reminder, and you're living it every day, my friend, the more we make, the more we give. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good luck with the book and with everything else.
Thank you, sir.